Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is the 42nd installment of Pinch Hit Friday. This podcast is a little bit timely. I'm actually going to use this as a follow-up to a presentation I did at this year's Perform Better Summits. Great events. If you haven't had a chance to attend, there's another one coming up here in Providence very shortly, but they bring together some of the best speakers around, and you get a really kind of multidisciplinary educational experience. And I kind of spoke a little bit with respect to how we batch athletes, something that's become more and more important as we've had multiple facilities. I've had my role in professional baseball, just the ability to teach other coaches what we're trying to do from a big picture approach standpoint, and also work efficiently to try to get the results that we need across a number of different locations and with a lot of different coaches who come from different backgrounds. So I wanted to kind of define 6 key principles that I think are really, really important when it comes to program design. And the number one is definitely determine your priorities. You have to understand what really matters, right? I always think back to there's a dietitian I knew, and we were working with a kid who wound up becoming a first rounder many, many years ago. And he desperately needed to put on weight. He had to be 6'4", 160 pounds when I first met him, and the goal was to get him up to 190 to 200 in that first off season. And she was just adamant that the worst thing he could possibly consume was dairy. He had no previous history with like dairy allergies. He wasn't lactose intolerant. There was nothing that really would make you think that it was really a bad thing. But she was just very, very adamant that all things dairy were the death of us. And as I look back on that, I'm like, that's just not the priority for an athlete like that. Maybe you want to get more refined with what kind of stuff we're consuming much later. But early on, it's about obviously understanding what are healthy and unhealthy foods, but more importantly, getting in total calories. So, in that dynamic, her priorities, I think, were really, really off. So we need to have a really, really refined approach to determining what matters. And sometimes that can be a really hard thing to do because we all have our personal biases, right? I trained as a competitive powerlifter for well over a decade. I love lifting heavy stuff. It's near and dear to me. But when we're talking about athletes, sometimes there's a point where you're strong enough and you really need to focus on just moving fast and really going and attacking other qualities. And in fact, if you do, too much loading in a powerlifting context, sometimes you really sap athletes of their rotational capacities. You make them really heavily compressed. So step number one in writing good programs is always defining your priorities and understanding what really matters. Now, number 2 is something that I think I've done well over the course of a career. It's always served me well, and that's document like crazy. A lot of times we see people that just don't either do thorough evaluations with their athletes, or they just don't document the evaluations they do. They always just throw it in the back of their mind. And the truth is, if you're trying to create this long-term relationship with your athletic population, you want to make sure that you understand what they were like back in 2021, just so you can compare what they look like when they walk in for the first day of the offseason of 25 to 26. If you can understand how your training has helped them, you can also start to appreciate where maybe they've had some maladaptations. Maybe you've lost some range of motion as you've chased certain force qualities, and maybe you need to take a step back and recalibrate. So I think this is one of the reasons why we have such strong relationships with some of our athletes who have been with us an extended period of time. It's not just that we kind of welcome them as part of our family, or that we're available to them year round as they go off and they play baseball in different places. But I think it has a lot to do with the fact that we have this amazing library of knowledge about them, their range of motion measurements, how they've responded to soft tissue treatments, what their force plate and their Proteus tests look like. All those things are really, really important. So I can't overstate enough how important it is to document things, not just with respect to helping athletes perform better and stay healthy, but also to protect yourself, right? It's a society that will race to lawsuits and things like that. So the more you can hold yourself to a higher level of professionalism and a standardization of care that's similar to what we see in the medical community, the better off you're going to be. And that applies not just to strength and conditioning coaches and the rehab community, but also to pitching coaches, hitting coaches. Keep notes on what's worked and what hasn't, and it will never, ever serve you wrong. Number 3, define the difference between what you know and what you can implement. This is a spinoff of a Mike Boyle quote, but in reality, if you're a brilliant person who's read Super Training 800 times, you're glued to PubMed, you've consumed every bit of informational module, you're extremely bright, and then you get put in a weight room where you're one coach and you've got 50 athletes in front of you, all of a sudden you realize there's a big gap between what you know and what you can implement. Versus if you're a one-on-one personal trainer, you're taking care of one elite professional athlete, or you just have a small body of athletes, athletes that you work with, you can do a lot more, particularly if you have an extended period of time with them. But, if I get a minor league baseball player who rolls in on January 15th and they want to train with us for a month before they head off to spring training, I'm not going to, spend 3 weeks teaching them how to Olympic lift, right? That's not going to be a productive use of time. So we really understand the time horizon. We understand the people in front of us, and then we need to match that up with, the expectations of that person and try to figure out what kind of a program, allows us to effectively blend those two things. Number four, remember that everything can't adapt optimally at the same time. So you have to appreciate that there's going to be give and take. There are going to be certain qualities that you can prioritize at certain times and others that you have to capture later, right? You have to understand your time horizon. So in a professional baseball offseason, we might get Major League Baseball players back the second week in October, and we might see them all the way up until mid-February. So like a good Major League offseason is about 19 weeks. So our goal is to get through four-week blocks and kind of assume that those other 3 weeks are going to take care of themselves in terms of travel to and from the season, maybe a little bit of missed time around the holidays or for a wedding or a honeymoon, something along those lines. But we know that if we've got 4 training blocks, first block is going to be much, more about building work capacity, reestablishing good body composition, putting some muscle mass back on, shoring up some joint stability, things like that. We're not going to beat them into the ground with aggressive sprinting and tons of med ball stuff or super aggressive throwing programs. We might preserve those qualities and move because it'll help us in other ways. But really, we're going to spend more time building some work capacity. Month 2, we're going to really chase some bigger strength gains. And then really we get to months 3 and 4, we start to attack a lot more power output. We might go from lifting 4 days a week down to 3. So we understand our time horizon, and it allows us to prioritize certain qualities. We're never going to go to like a classic linear periodization model where, you're detraining certain qualities, while you chase other ones and you just feel like you're playing whack-a-mole throughout the year. We want to maintain, some qualities while we're prioritizing the others. But, this is the beauty of having kind of a concurrent setup is you can have some give and take in your programs. That's something that I think characterizes every program that we utilize at Cressey Sports Performance. Number 5, on the efficiency side of things is you always want to batch programs. The single biggest mistake that I see in young coaches is they sit down to write one program and they're just tapping their keyboard and they're super frustrated and they're staring at the screen. Nothing's coming out. It's like a writer's block moment. And part of the reason is that they haven't gotten in their groove, right? So they're overthinking things. One of my rules is I never sit down to write just one program. I have dedicated blocks where I want to, get in the mindset where I can, bang out 4 or 5 of them. That's something that's really, really important for me. And I'd encourage folks to do that. Even if you're early in your career and you're just trying to practice writing programs, don't do one at a time. Try to find your mojo. You're going to realize that you get more and more efficient the more that you write. And you're also going to recognize, certain habits that maybe you have where you make the same mistake writing, several programs in a row, and it allows you to catch it where you might not see that if you do one at a time, over the course of, different points in the day. And then last but not least, this one is also super important, especially for young coaches. You never want to stare at a blank template. You always want to try to fit all the new programs that you write into some kind of an existing schema. In other words, you want to build on what's worked. So as an example, let's say I have a super stiff left-handed pitcher, low left shoulder, wide infrasternal angle, who's got, limited hip external rotation. He's got anteverted hips. Like I have a major league player that we work with that is built exactly like that. And I know that we've had great success with him. So when I get that athlete in, I'm going to go and I'm going to look at the success that we've had with that other athlete that moves very similarly to him. And I'm going to build on that. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stare at a blank template and really go from there. So I always encourage people to understand, what are the characteristics that you utilize in order to batch an athlete, right? Maybe it's pitcher versus position player. Maybe it's tight versus loose. Maybe it's wide versus narrow infrasternal angles. There's all these different things you might look at. But I guarantee you that the longer you're in this industry, the more likely you are to be able to draw from a previous athlete that you worked with and had some good success with. So you can kind of build that side of things out. It allows you to do a little bit of templating where appropriate. We tend to do a little bit more templating with respect to some of our sprint/movement progressions, some of our med ball drills based on what we're trying to attack for certain athletes. So those are all, I think, strategies that are super important. Everything from, understanding prioritization and documentation to separating yourself from your personal biases, understanding the difference between what you know and what you can implement. appreciate that you can't chase every single quality at the same time, and you have to really understand your time horizon. You want to always write programs in batch, and you never want to stare at a blank template. Instead, you want to try to fit every new person into an existing schema that's worked, a previous athlete or client that you've had great success with. So programming is the toughest thing to teach. The only way to get really good at it is to observe a lot of programs, coach the programs that are written to see if they actually match up in terms of time and the effort that's demanded of your athletes, and then obviously go out and write a lot of them, make mistakes, make corrections after the fact, and over the course of time you're going to find that it becomes much easier. So hope you appreciate these tips and have a great weekend. This episode is brought to you by AG1, the most comprehensive NSF certified for sport daily nutritional supplement I've ever tried. With so many stressors in life, it can be difficult to maintain effective nutritional habits and give our bodies the nutrients they need to thrive. As a father of 3 young kids and a co-founder of multiple businesses in multiple states on top of still being an avid exerciser, I know that busy schedules can really take their toll on us. Whether it's poor sleep, exercise or life stressors, environmental factors, or simply not eating enough of the right foods, we can often wind up deficient nutritionally. This is where AG1 can really help. It's a game-changing nutritional insurance policy. They simplify the logistics of getting optimal nutrition on a daily basis by giving you just one thing with all the best things. That's why I use it daily, as do several of my family members, and we recommend it to a lot of our top athletes. 1 scoop of AG1 contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients that work together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet to support energy, focus, digestion, and recovery. And this can all happen for less than $3 per day and without taking multiple products. While most nutritional supplements come to market and stay stagnant, AG1 continues to obsessively improve this one holistic formula based on the latest research, producing over 50 improvements in the last decade alone. They invest in the most absorbable and natural source of each ingredient and go above and beyond in third-party testing to ensure their customers continue to receive the highest quality and best tasting nutrition habit on the planet. Whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, it'll work for you, and it contains less than 1 gram of sugar per serving. They put 75 ingredients through the rigorous NSF certification test to come up with a safe formula that's trusted by some of the world's top athletes, including many of our own at Cressey Sports Performance. Right now, AG1 is giving our listeners a special offer of 10 free travel packets with their first purchase. Just head to drinkag1.com/Cressey and claim this special offer. These travel packets are perfect for supporting your immune system, energy, and gut health while you're traveling for games, training, or simply on the go. They can be great counterbalance to the less than ideal on-the-road food options that are out there for a lot of our traveling baseball players. So if you want to bridge the gap between deficient and optimal and give yourself the best chance of getting nutrient diversity, head to drinkag1.com/Cressey to get 10 free travel packets with your first purchase. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Cressey, Cressey. You won't regret it.